Hello, everybody. It's your boy, Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming. Here today with why Xenoblade Chronicles 3 does sequels right. I'm going to explain how it does it. So, let's just start off the bat. This game is a direct continuation of Xenoblade 1 and 2. And a lot of the times when it comes to video game sequels, if they're not like a disconnected world or story like Final Fantasy where none of the games really tie into each other outside of a handful, it's very hard to say or to recommend to a player who has not experienced the series before, hey, jump in with the third game. It's really hard to pull that off. Only a few series can really do that in an effective way where that new player doesn't feel just completely lost. But Xenoblade 3, at least from my experience and from my experience with talking to other people who have only played Xenoblade 3 or that Xenoblade 3 was their first Xenoblade game, I feel that Xenoblade 3 does the whole concept of a video game sequel very well. It executes on that idea in a number of different ways to make it both approachable for new players, but also rewarding and fulfilling for veterans of the series like myself. So, let's talk about that, and let's break this video up into two main sections, story and gameplay. And let's start with the story here. Like I said before, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a direct continuation of Xenoblade 1 and 2, but it's very approachable for new players. How does it do that story-wise? Well, it does this in a couple of ways. One, the story can easily be enjoyed as a self-contained narrative. It's a new world with Iodios. You have a new main cast of characters, so you don't have to worry about any older character development for any of these characters. It's all fresh and new for Xenoblade 3. But what it also does to reward veteran players is it brings back old characters, but you don't need their backstory for those characters to work within the confines of the story told in 3. You don't need all that lore for the role they take up in this game, because they're more like stewards, they're more like these overarching characters you're trying to strive to get to in the first place. Because the characters that are in your face are all almost entirely new and introduced with Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And because they do that, you don't need that backstory. But for the veteran players, it's cool to learn about those characters, how they contribute to the overall narrative of Xenoblade Chronicles, and how the older characters are introduced, and what effect they have on the story as a whole for Xenoblade 3, but also for the narrative of Xenoblade Chronicles as a whole. And then you pivot from the characters to the overall world. And this is one of the big ones for me. The world has big and diverse set pieces that feel larger than life and mysterious if you're a new player, but if you're a veteran Xenoblade Chronicles fan, then everything is a reference, and you are constantly asking yourself, how did this get here? Why is that here? Why is there a giant sword on the horizon? What the hell is this massive whale monster that's now a mountain range? And everybody is acting like that's normal. What's going on here? And it produces these two different mindsets, because it changes how you take in the world, but both ways, in my opinion, are engaging and captivating, while raising questions for the player more in line with their level of experience in the series. It's a very subtle thing, but the way they tackle it in Xenoblade 3, in my opinion, adds to the overall narrative. It adds to the overall experience, because if you're a veteran player like myself, shout out to Support Assist for doing that again, if you're a veteran player like myself, you come into Xenoblade 3, you see Uriah, you see the Mechonis sword, you see the Mechonis hand, you see Arithia Sea, you see Mac the Force, you see all these locations and set pieces, and you're wondering, how did these places get from Xenoblade 1 and 2 into 3? And that's an overall hanging question, kind of like a sword of Damocles, ready to strike down at any point in the narration, but you don't know when it's going to do that. It's always something just hanging over your head, one of those main question marks just waiting to be answered. But if you're a new player, you'll look at these different areas and you're like, wow, these places look very cool, very refreshing in terms of video game landscapes. What is this giant sword? What's this giant whale monster thing? Why is this giant mechanical hand in the middle of a desert? These places look cool. I want to learn more about these locations and learn more about these stories. And it's a subtle thing when you think about it overall, but that difference of approach, the difference of those questions that the world itself imposes upon the player, that matters. That means something, because to a veteran player, It's raising questions about the overall series as a whole, but if you're a new player into Xenoblade 3, it's raising questions that can be self-contained and answered in a self-contained fashion within the realm of Xenoblade 3. That is a very subtle but elegant design choice that Monolith did here, and I don't feel that it gets enough credit, and I don't feel like they get enough credit with Xenoblade 3 for how well they enacted upon the whole concept of a video game sequel. Because just the world itself can give you many different questions if you're new or a returning player, and it changes your like innate goal that's running through your entire playthrough about wanting to learn more about the world. It changes the question that you are asking of the game, and both sets of questions get answered. And I feel that the game overall does a very good job of that. Now you take that and you top it off with having a whole brand new cast of characters, like I said before, where if you're a new player, you're like, oh, okay, these are new characters, I don't have to worry about their past involvement in the series. I don't really have to worry about that outside of a couple of characters, but even then you don't need to worry about it for the confines of this game. I can just take in the sights, take in the sounds, and let these characters develop before me and engage me in that fashion. But if you're an older player, a returning player like myself, like I said before, with these characters, like, okay, how are these characters going to affect the overall worlds of Xenoblade Chronicles? How are they going to have an impact? Why is this a numbered Xenoblade game? These are questions that you raise as a player, depending upon if you're a new player or a returning player. And the way they tackle these questions and the way they can completely change your frame of reference and your frame of mind when you're playing through the game, if you're a new or old returning player, that is a very effective way to do a video game sequel, in my opinion. Because you approach the game through two completely different lenses, and the game satisfies both. And I feel that is overall really well handled and executed within Xenoblade 3. And then you have characters like Melia and Nia. With Xenoblade 3, if you're a newer player, you're like, hey, who are these characters that everyone thinks they're important? Hey, they're the queens of the world. Okay, that's cool, I want to learn more about them. If you're a returning player like myself, you're like, holy mother of God, that's Melia and freaking Nia. Why are they here? I need to learn more. And those are questions that drive the player forward, that drive them to want to do the next quest, to discover more about the world and to uncover its secrets. But the secrets you're uncovering are different depending upon if you're new or returning. You get a different experience, but one is not necessarily lesser than the other. And that is and in my opinion, that's a very well executed story, especially as a sequel. Now, let's pivot the discussion from the story and talk about how the gameplay itself is a good sequel for Xenoblade Chronicles. Because Xenoblade Chronicles has notoriously had very unique gameplay when it comes to JRPGs, because it kind of blends a style of gameplay you don't really see outside of, say, ARPGs or MMOs. But it does it in a single-player JRPG, and it's a very polarizing combat system. But I feel like over time, the combat has just gotten more engaging, more fun, and more active. And in Xenoblade 3, I feel a lot of those themes and motifs they had with the gameplay and the combat overall have really come to a head here. There's a reason in an interview, Ask the Developer interview, I'll put in this link in the description down below, they said this game's a kind of like a gameplay culmination for the series as a whole. Because it really does feel like that. Because what it does is it takes the good of the previous two games, Xenoblade 1 and 2, and you can argue 3 with Xenoblade Chronicles X. It keeps the good stuff, and it throws away the bad. The affinity system was really cool from Xenoblade 1, and for those who may not be aware what the affinity system was in Xenoblade 1, it was essentially this web of interconnected relationships between various characters in the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. And the way you could have a direct impact on how these characters interact with each other by doing various side quests. You have certain choices that you could do and enact in those side quests that change relationships, that inherently change the rewards that you got. It was a very cool feature, but the problem with it in Xenoblade 1, at least in my opinion, was that the way you acquired affinity, the way you affected affinity, was too much of a slog involving generic collect or kill side quests. You know, those very World of Warcraft vanilla style of quests that are very, like, one-dimensional, don't really have much depth or meat in them. They feel very bland and just kind of like filler. But with Xenoblade Chronicles 3, what they do is very interesting in my opinion. What they do is they keep that affinity system. They don't shove it in your face. It's there if you really care about it. But what you're really doing is you're building reputation for each of these individual areas, which was another mechanic in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. But the way that you gain rep in Xenoblade 3 is overall kind of the same. But what they do is they change the vehicle in which that reward structure is given. What they do is they relegate those collectathon quests to an easy turn-in that you can do anywhere in the world through the main menu. It's very quick, it's very simple, it's very to the point. You don't have to do them though. They aren't mandatory. At least I think a lot of the time. Because a lot of the time you'll just get a lot of the resources you need from them just passively. And then you get a new quest saying, hey, I can do this turn-in now. Oh cool, I can only just turn that in. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. With a bit of a squeegee. And what you can do is, they really just serve, those like collectathon quests, they just serve as a buffer more than anything for affinity. But the main way you're going to gain affinity is through doing the main quest and doing side quests that develop characters and locations like in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. So they take the mechanical system from Xenoblade 1 and remove the acquisition system from Xenoblade 1, but insert the acquisition system from Xenoblade 2. In terms of having cool and in-depth side quests that develop and build out and flesh out, really, the world and various characters, and also relationships between various colonies in the world. It's a really cool thing, the way they did that, because it makes the side quests feel rewarding. Not just because they might give you XP, or might give you currency, or a cool item. Because honestly, for me, a lot of time, that stuff is just secondary. Because a lot of times, I do these side quests just to learn more about the world. Because the story that's presented to me as the player is engaging enough. So it takes these ideas of what worked in Xenoblade 1, X, and 2. Let's take the good and leave out the bad. And we might mix and match the good. So what happens is, you get a system that is the best of both worlds, that feels fleshed out, that feels rewarding, and that doesn't have a real big sticking point like they did in the previous games. Now let's talk about a mechanical function in terms of gameplay that Xenoblade 3 did very well, because it took the good from the previous games and removed the bad. The blade system from Xenoblade 2 was really cool. What it did was, it gave you these various characters that you could unlock, and what you did was you slotted them into party members like individual little parties, and you can swap your weapons, which gave you different abilities, and for each of these blades you got and you leveled up, they might give you a new quest line or a new heart-to-heart, a little like bit of dialogue. So you learn more about these characters, you learn more about the world because they are interacting with the world. It added to the characterization, and it rounded out the cast of characters. It felt really fun and rewarding. What was the issue with that system in Xenoblade 2? If you played Xenoblade 2, a lot of times I have heard people not like Xenoblade 2 simply because of this blade system. And why? Because the way you acquired most of the blades was through a gacha system in a single-player JRPG. No, I don't get what they were thinking either. I didn't mind it. There's an argument to be made about the blade system. That, hey, every player can have a different playthrough because they'll have different blades for their playthrough and en masse, right? Like, there's an argument to be made there, but the problem was, if you're like a collector, if you like going for 100%, or if you like going for more of a completionist playthrough, like myself with Xenoblade 2, it turns into a massive slog near the end there. Or if you just want to get the blades you really care about, and you just get like an unfortunate string of blades that you don't really care about. Because some blades were way better than others. And it took me until like the 200-hour mark to get all the blades from Xenoblade 2. What does Xenoblade 3 do? Well, people liked the blade combat. They liked the fact that it changed up the gameplay. They liked the side quests. They liked the heart-to-hearts. What they didn't like was the acquisition system. So let's take the mechanical gameplay of the blade system, call it the hero system in Xenoblade 3. That gives you classes and also gives you outfits like Xenoblade Chronicles 1. While being unlocked through in-depth side quests or main story quests that flesh out the world and develop the world while building those characters. That was perfect. That is a perfect compromise in my opinion. Because what it does is it takes what was good about the blade system from Xenoblade 2 and just keeps that. And it rips out the bad. It doesn't even try and iterate on it. It just gives you a good freaking system that adds to the world building, rounds out the cast of characters, and also gives you some really good dialogue and some really good storylines with a lot of these blades. I love Gray as a character, for instance. I really enjoyed his storyline. Sagiri was really fun. Oh, Triton's the freaking boy. Like, all of these characters give you memorable experiences, but without that sour taste in your mouth of a gacha RNG-based system in a single-player game. Because you don't need that. So, they gave the players what the players wanted. The fun system of the blade system, but with a way better acquisition system, and honestly, I can't really ask for much more than that. They listened to the players, they listened to feedback, and what they did was, after listening to all that feedback from Xenoblade 1, X, and 2, they made a game with all the best features from it. Look, I may prefer the chain attack system from Xenoblade 2, but I really enjoy the chain attack system from Xenoblade 3. I feel that it has its own place. I appreciate the effort they put in with Xenoblade 3, because it feels like they took player feedback into account. And it feels like they care about what the players feel. And when a game can do that, and when a game makes me feel that, I appreciate it. And to me, they just made a better game because of that. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is probably going to be my game of the year. That's just how good and how high I rank this game. And if you want to see how high I rank the game in overall, wait until my top 10 games of all time list comes out, people. Because Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has made the top 10. I'll announce that now. I'm not going to say where it is. You have to tune in to find out. But I'm going to call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. Leave a comment down below with your favorite aspect of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Is it a particular story moment? Is it the music? Video on the music coming out in the next couple of days, by the way. Tune in for that. Is it a gameplay system? Is it a character? Let me know. Was that a particular side quest? I want to know what your favorite part of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was. And while you're down below, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe with everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.